Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of my videos. Today we are continuing on part 3 of one of my recent games, and in the final part we looked at this knight f4 blunder and why it was such a blunder, as it now gives me this horrible pawn structure to work with. And I spoke a little bit about the fact that, even if white isn't successful in delivering the checkmate or delivering the win, he can at the very least work on these weaknesses, which he does later on in my position. So in the game, white continued rook to e1. He's already got threats, playing e5, breaking open the centre, and then now my queen is under attack. So I've got to prepare for this. So I played bishop to e6 to sort of block that. Keep in mind, I've still got this potential idea, maybe queen coming to d7, maybe looking at some potential sacrifices on h3 to win the game. e5 was now played, breaking open the centre, and well, it's very difficult for where I put this knight. I put it on h5, which is just a horrible square to go to. I think I wanted to try and defend this pawn at the very least, but there's already some potential threats for me. I was even thinking about, some really straightforward ideas for white, of maybe moving his queen back to d1, maybe at some point creating some threats with the knights, and snapping off the knight that way. So it's not a great position for it to be in. We're always taught knights on the side, I do not abide, or knights to the rim or dim, so we certainly don't want to have this in our game. Instead, knight to d5 is probably slightly better. The problem, of course, is after this, I think white still enjoys a nice position. I think he's already still got some potential ideas in his position of doing something with these pawns and trying to break open my position. So, yeah, I didn't really like to have to make this compromise. I'm being honest with you, but I don't think the alternative is all that good either. So e takes here. I thought about actually going queen to d7 here, which would have been interesting, but the problem now is knight comes to d4, and e4, my position starts to crumble a little bit. So yeah, so I captured this pawn. There was a check. King came to e8, and my position's bad. Let's put it this way: it's not a great position, but I still got some chances at some complications. So I'm already looking in this position at ideas of f4, trapping this bishop on this h7 square. So I thought that was quite interesting. I thought actually maybe he's not as good as I thought his position. If I can trap this bishop, at the very least I should have a very good game. Queen came to d3. So now defending this pawn. It was just hanging just a moment ago. My rook came to d8, so I'm now re-attacking this pawn, and his rook came to d1, so now re-defending the pawn again. And well, here I tried to make the threat that I had a little bit earlier a bit more of a reality. I now played queen to d7. This just has the simple idea. I'm going to play f4 and trap this bishop on h6. At the very least, if I can't play that, I can play a move like knight to f6, then try and recapture that way. Knight came to e5, so hitting my queen. I, of course, thought I was going to be winning, but I totally miscalculated here. So I captured here on e5, assuming, I'm going to win a bishop. I should be absolutely fine here. What I missed is, obviously, this when I capture here, is the rook can come here. And of course, even after the knight comes here, this is all fine for white, as he just moves his bishop back, and you notice the rook is defending the bishop here, so it's absolutely fine. So probably instead of doing this, maybe moves like queen to c7 potentially would have been interesting. I've now got some little threats going on, potentially just capturing here. So if let's say I just make a nothing move, I'm already looking at ideas of c5, maybe blasting open the centre, exploiting this pawn, this pin that white has here. So It's a shame it wasn't played in this position, but such things happen. I think I just didn't calculate this far enough. I think one of the challenges I had here at this point, I think both of us really, we were down to our last few minutes. I think I had maybe 2 minutes left on the clock, or 2.5 minutes. My opponent had even less time than I did, actually. So I just thought, okay, this looks winning. I'm just going to go for it. But of course, didn't see the ramifications. There's another potential problem now after this. Is obviously I've given up this bishop on g7. This was a key defender of my king, and well, my king is now going to get under a little bit of pressure now in this late middle game. So there was this bishop came to f5, and well, I'm not really interested in just capturing it off. If I capture it, rook captures, my knight starts to hang, this pawn starts to hang, everything starts to fall apart slightly. So I kept the tension in the position. Rook to g8. I thought at the very least, let's try for some sort of tactics along here. He captured here. I took back the pawn. At the very least, my pawn structure doesn't look as bad as it did just earlier. At least I've undoubled the pawns. So maybe I can hopefully survive here. But as I say, this game now is pure survival. I just have to try and somehow cope in this horrible looking position. And one of the ways I try it at the very least is just go for complications and go for tactics. So queen f3 is a really nice idea actually. It's now going to just be nicely scooping up this f4 pawn. I played queen to g7, so I'm now creating a little bit of complication. So if queen captures, I throw in the checkmate. So that's basically the threat. Knight comes to e2, so now re-attacking this pawn. I jump my knight into d5, and actually this knight is not badly placed now. It's a really powerful. It's controlling this this lovely square here, and yeah, I thought my position wasn't as bad as it looked. My pieces are starting to mobilize quite nicely together. The problem is in getting the activity, of course, I then fall a little bit behind in material. So after rook captures here, I'm now down a pawn. And it's not the best position to try and defend him. My king safety is shockingly bad, so there's always potential of little tactics to win the game. I mean, just one simple idea, something like this, queen here. Of course, you can't do it now because of this threat, but queen here, he's then threatening just to capture this pawn. And how do I defend against something like that? It's really challenging. So yeah, certainly something to watch out for. In any case, I now re-defend the pawn. Rook came to e4, re-attacking the pawn. So white played this really soundly. He just slowly increased his advantage. He's now going to be winning this pawn back. It's very difficult for me to defend. I play queen to g4, g5, trying to re-defend it again. And now white focuses on his the safety of his position. King to h2. So now he's got a simple plan, get his rook maybe over to g1, and his king is nice and safe. He's got still up a pawn. He might be up 2 pawns very, very soon, if I'm not careful about what I do with this pawn. So I've moved my rook to g6. I thought maybe I'll try and shift it over to f6 and then hold on to this pawn as best I could. G1 was played. I moved my queen back to f6. I'm not sure why I didn't move it with the knight here. What was the reason? I guess there wasn't really any reason why I didn't do that. Yeah, I haven't really got a clue. I think, was I worried about some ideas like this maybe? But I don't know, maybe not. But I moved my queen now to f3, so it now redefends this pawn. And, well, b3 was played. I didn't really quite understand this move, but at the very least, white's got a nice position. He doesn't need to rush his position now. I've moved my queen to d6. I'm just trying to, as I say, I'm just trying to create complications as best as I can. E5, rook to e5. My rook came to g8. again trying to create some problems for him. But now he can capture this pawn, and well, my position starts to fall apart slightly. Rook to f8. He put his queen to g6, so now potential threats if I move this queen off. I move my queen to f6, and now this really nice move, rook to e8. So essentially forcing me to swap off the pieces. I threw in the check, why not? G3 was played, which I was quite happy to see, but you know, at least it creates a little bit of a weakness for him, but it's not really anything to worry about. I move my other rook along. There was a capture, and well, after this move, king to h7 and then f4, I think white's got a very, very clear edge here. Well, definitely a winning edge, shall I say. He's up 2 pawns, he's got nice control of the centre, he's got this very good centralised queen, which controls pretty much my whole position. His king is nice and safe, there's no real worries at this minute. You know, I'd have to spend probably 2 or 3 tempi just to get around to start you know, doing perpetual checks and stuff like that. White is playing for nothing more or nothing less than a draw in this position. He's definitely got a win at this point at the very least, or at least a draw, I should say. But the problem I had here, and the problem my opponent had, was we both were very low on time. My opponent, I wasn't too sure how much time he had left, but I think he had less than a minute and a half. I had maybe about 4 minutes or so. We were playing on an increment, so of course I had managed to accumulate a bit more time over the past few moves. And I think maybe my opponent was a little bit worried about trying to battle this out into an endgame. He was actually significantly lower rated than I was, so I think he perhaps was a little bit worried that I might be able to somehow scramble a win. Maybe he would blunder and I win this position, but shockingly my opponent offered me a draw, and well, I can't decline it. Shall I say. I think I certainly had a terrible position here, so I was happy to accept the draw. But what a game my opponent played. Yeah, it played absolutely brilliantly. You know, used his small edge in the centre and slowly squashed me off the board and played extremely well. And as you can see at the end, I was having to sort of fight for my life a little bit at the end, trying to hold this terrible position that I had given myself. But in any case, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you to my opponent, and I hope you enjoyed this little style of doing it with in extra parts. If you enjoyed this, make sure you leave a like, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and I'll see you later.